Yeah, man. Virtual gigs and stuff. I remember reading an article recently about in Berlin, I think, or somewhere in Europe, like the club
Mhm.
scene, how like some promoters put together like like a virtual club scene experience, basically. And there was like complete with like
Nice.
DJs and like bouncers at the door, and like yeah, like virtual
That's awesome.
like a bathroom too, like a virtual bathroom,
Mm.
and like
That's
yeah,
to
with that
really,
that
really give you the full immersion.
yeah, yeah. I don't know. Yeah.
It's fantastic. Like, yeah, can you get imagining what behavior would get you thrown out by virtual bouncers? Like, I don't even want to really speculate
I don't
about
know.
what that would be, but also how they would throw you out. I guess you just get booted from your Zoom call or whatever. But
Yeah.
it's pretty great.
No. It looked kind of cool. I mean, I just saw pictures of it. I didn't actually do the thing, but like,
Mm. Yeah, oh yeah.
um, yeah. And then like how you get in, let in is like a random thing too. So it's like trying to make it
Mm.
authentic or whatever. I don't know.
Yeah,
But
they
yeah.
don't do the where they if they sorry, if they make you like like you see old movies and things where they're letting people into the club and they're like, you're not dressed nice enough, you can't come in. It's like, oh yeah, that's nice, you look snazzy, come on in. Like, it's great if they just have to evaluate you over a video chat. It's
Yeah.
like, you're Zoom calling in your pajamas, you don't get to come into the virtual club. Not
Yeah. Yeah.
allowed.
It's pretty hilarious. Yeah. It's a thing though, I guess like a bunch of people are on that
Oh
since you
yeah.
can't do anything else right now, Or
Yeah, I mean, like,
yeah.
whatever gives solace. I know some record labels were putting on kind of like they're putting on virtual music festivals where they would like have a lineup of bands, and they'd have like a 10, 15, sometimes 30-minute set that they either the bands had recorded in their homes and then pieced together, or like they had rented out a space for themselves and then they played just the band by themselves, and they just aired that festival. I know, kind of maybe kind of early into the shelter in place. I found myself watching some of those to get some kind of stimulation and remind myself of what concerts were like. Kind of bittersweet, of course, but
Yeah.
because I want to be there, but at least I'm hearing music. And yeah, so it's finding solutions and doing what the most positive uh, course of action for people's sanity, I suppose. Um, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Did you see or hear about there was like an artist do you know the on like the video game like Fortnite?
I
He
know
like
of the game. What did he do?
he uh he basically hosted he performed like a concert within the video game,
Oh wow.
and there was some kind of like crazy amount of like people that signed on for this one a moment. It was like it's some like record setting, people that signed on for this one, and it was like a short. I think it was only like uh, I don't know, 5 or 15 minutes or something, like real short.
Yeah, yeah,
Um,
yeah,
but yeah, it's kind of like it's a very new thing. It's like a new phenomenon, like a
yeah. It's interesting because it's like I have a lot of friends that I grew up with, and I'm historically kind of a gamer. I have a lot of friends that were online gamers, and like we're more into chatting to people online, meeting people online. Just for a long time, is more introverted, and so it's like I remember when the shelter in place happened, a lot of them were suddenly just like, I am totally in my element. Like, I don't have to leave my house for work. I am the people I'm talking to. Like, I have to talk to them online. If I'm meeting new people, I'm talking to them online, and that was always where they thrived, doing that kind of thing. And so yeah, it was interesting. So it's like so. I don't mean to like contradict, but it seems like it's not even like a new thing. It's like a newly widespread thing. It's suddenly the rest of society that hasn't been in this kind of niche world of video games and online communication is like, oh, this is necessary and we have to do this. So it's interesting to see like who suddenly is able to handle it, who has trouble, and who has like had been doing it anyway, and they're just kind of like, yeah, whatever, like, you know, terrible old situation, but here we are doing what we wanted to do anyway. Yeah,
Yeah, no,
uh,
I would totally agree that it's not like people playing video games is not new at all, you know, and
yeah,
um, like the interacting and the online, gaming where it becomes kind of like interactive, with a bunch of people doing it.
yeah, and
Uh,
like actually social
yeah,
and
yeah,
creates a community. Yeah, but I'm impressed that that Fortnite didn't crash when everybody went to watch his concert or whatever. You know, like there's
I
always
don't
that
know.
issue with
Maybe it did, man. I don't
with
know that much. Like I don't know if it did or not.
that.
Maybe it didn't.
That'd be funny. That'd be
Yeah.
really rough for him if he had to like limit admission. I don't know how Fortnite works. Maybe there's only a limit to how many people can be in one. I don't know, one space or server or something. But yeah, just
Yeah.
Fortnite wasn't ready for this.
I don't know how it works. I've never played that game or um
Yeah, me neither.
it's a thing. It's a thing though, definitely.
Oh
Like
yeah,
esports is like a new, again, not really new, but is like a thing now,
yeah,
which is
yeah.
kind of,
Suddenly it's a big thing. Yeah,
is that seems like odd to me too, because like, people make like actual real money playing video games and being good at video games, which is like totally
yeah,
odd to me, the thought of
yeah,
that.
yeah, yeah. Well, I mean,
Um,
yeah. But then on the other hand, you think about people. I mean, it doesn't seem weird now because normal sports has been so integrated into society for so long, especially in America, like for the last 100 or so years. But like the idea of someone making several $1 million a year for throwing a ball for playing a game that you play like on your yard as a kid, like it also seems wild, but it's so much more normal. But esports still seems weird to me too, even though I'm like a gamer and I've like had friends that play in competitive like tournaments for like small amounts of money, and suddenly it's like, oh yeah, like who's the best at Dota or
yeah,
public player unknown's battlegrounds or whatever, like all yeah, it's and I love how I love the advertising for it more than anything because it's presented like normal sports. A lot of times it's just like, oh yeah, look at him click that mouse real fast, and like
yeah,
it's like fast cuts and colors and like flashy everything, which is part of for the course. But yeah, it just cracks me up because it's such like a yeah, growing up for us it was such like a quote nerd unquote thing to do is play games competitively. And I don't know.
yeah, yeah,
It's fantastic.
yeah. In a way, like any game, making money off any game is like kind of silly, because like, what are you really doing? You're just really good at this one thing. Like, oh, I throw the ball. And that's what I do. I run
Yeah,
fast and I
yeah.
throw the ball.
Yeah, oh,
you
yeah,
know.
yeah, totally.
Um,
It's like it's a craft, but then also yeah, but also it's like everybody throws the ball. Like, I don't know.
yeah.
Yeah, it's funny.
Um,
I remember as a kid like wishing when I would play video games where like money was like where like fake money was the virtual currency. I remember having a fantasy that money would come out of the computer and like if you printed out the CD drive or something, I'd be like, oh right, money. Of course, it's like a 10-year-old who doesn't need $8,000 or whatever was the
yeah.
game currency was.
Yeah. But yeah, I think it probably seems weird just because it's new, because I mean, yeah, like sports, like any sport really, like you could be really good.
Hmm.
Like chess doesn't seem as silly, like to be really good at chess, or like
Yeah,
people make money
because it
playing.
seems
Yeah.
Yeah, because chess has that like kind of cerebral connotation to
Yeah.
it, where it's like, oh, these people are great thinkers and extremely good strategists. But I mean, but then on the other hand, like there's lots of arguments. No, yeah, there's been arguments for a lot of competitive gaming where it's like these games, some of these games can be considered like their own kind of chess. And I haven't
Yeah,
dived into
totally.
that. Haven't dove into that too much, but I remember UC Berkeley, a guy was teaching a class on competitive StarCraft playing for years,
Hmm.
where the students had to read The Art of War by Sun Tzu and like apply it to their StarCraft playing. And yeah, it was just like these wild concepts. Yeah, it's such a weird like space to because it's like a lot of legitimacy, but also it seems kind of patently ridiculous just because of culture and everything else.
Yeah, no, I think there's like definitely um just because it's like a video game, like electronic, doesn't mean it's uh like, I think there's definitely things you can learn from it. Like real
Absolutely.
things, and it can be like a real like stimulating for your mind too, just like chess is. Like there can be games that are like puzzles and stuff, and like I remember that class that you mentioned where they would kind of reminds me of another thing I heard a while ago about how in the military they'll have make people play video games where they're like the war like video games where they're fighting, like battle, like frontier, like shooting people as like a
Yeah,
simulation to
yeah,
prepare people for like the real thing.
yeah. I don't know if I knew that. I mean, I'm not too surprised,
Hmm.
but yeah, that's pretty wild to me.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, yeah, that's crazy. I mean, I know like a lot of. I remember like I'm curious now what games, but I remember like because I've played shooters for a couple of decades now, and I remember like a certain shift at some point where suddenly the way the games were depicted seemed more real, kind of more visceral, kind of like an upsetting way where like I would play it and I'd enjoy gaming, but also I would feel kind of almost, I don't know if gross is the word, but like I'd feel some kind of like, whoa, this is, I feel uneasy is a better word, I think, just doing this because it seems too visceral and brutal.
too
So I
realistic,
could see,
or
yeah, something about the way the movements, the graphics, the way people, the way the I guess animations were, and the way the game was set up, and the way it was programmed, the way it was everything interacts became more lifelike in strange ways. And I don't know if games. So I haven't played as many recent games, so I don't know how they are now. But I'm thinking of like Call of Duty Modern Warfare, and suddenly that was like really really brutal a lot of the time. So I could see how like how some people playing that could either get desensitized, or if like you're being trained to be in the military, how that could in some ways prepare you for that kind of brutality. Um,
hmm,
yeah, it's fascinating.
yeah, they're corrupting children, man.
Yeah, yeah, those darn video games. They're just teaching our kids
They're
how to
poisoning
beat
the
people
youth.
up. Gosh,
I don't know. Yeah.
that's such a weird. Yeah, it's rough.
How do you feel about censorship and like what do you call them? Parental like advisory stickers and that sort of thing.
I think. I mean, depends on the context, I suppose. But I mean, parental advisory and like rating the game certain things and I think having like what is in the game on the box or in anything on the box is not a bad thing inherently, because then like parents should should be able to mediate what their kids are exposed to, but then also like sometimes it gets a little, I don't know, there's lots of
Yeah,
weird
yeah.
ground where
I think
things
those
get
are
out of hand.
yeah. I would agree with that. I think they're like two different things, though. Too like like ratings aren't necessarily censorship. I would agree that I think ratings are fine, and
Yeah,
you know, parents should like teach their children like good ethics and morals, and try
yeah,
and
or they should, yeah,
yeah,
they should at least have control of what their kids see, so that they can, like, as a parent, you're parenting and you want to teach your kids the ways of the world, and it's hard to manage that if suddenly your kid is exposed to something by mistake or whatever, and now you don't know what your kid knows or thinks of something. You want to be able to like use any experiences or anything they see as like a teaching tool, or a way to be like, okay, well, you've seen this, now let's talk about that, and say, and some, you don't want to like just throw everything at your kid and give them like a
yeah,
games with a lot of
yeah, like free
gross
access to
content or
the
whatever.
give them free access to the internet or something like
Yeah, exactly.
without
that
any.
that would that would that would go poorly very quickly, because that's
Yeah.
how the internet is. But as for censorship, which is a more interesting topic, I like censorship is tricky, because I mean, it's been a while since I thought about it. I used to think about this a lot when I was like a radical college student, and I probably still have a lot of the same beliefs, but I hadn't reflected on it in a while. But I tend to think that, like, most most content, I can't. There's not a lot of content, I think, that should be outright suppressed. Like, I'm not in favor of hate speech or things that promote hate, like of a group or a people, or a gender or anything like that. But I think there's a difference between that and like depicting things that are challenging to people. Not necessarily in favor, but like showing things that are horrendous, because a lot of art has like really challenging imagery or challenging uh, words or ideas, and not that it's promoting those ideas or that imagery, but that it's making us confront that imagery and reminding us why we don't want the world to be that way. um, just to go back to the example of those war video games, like, as a younger kid, I would shoot people in video games, and I'd be like, yay, guns, whatever, I don't know anything about mortality, or whatever, and I wouldn't give it much thought. And it was just aliens, like, whatever. But when I started playing, when the games got more intense or more realistic, and as I was aging, I'd find myself playing these games, and all the, like, as much as I enjoyed them, I was all the while kind of reminding they felt like more of a reminder of why I don't like violence, and why I don't like war as a concept, why I don't like the idea of having to kill someone, or force anyone to kill anyone else, or see someone kill someone. Like, it's just all these. Yeah, it's kind of I don't know if cathartic is the word, but um, perhaps a little bit cathartic, in that that's like, oh yes, this is not a good thing in reality, so I will keep it in the video game, and understand that it is a terrible thing, because I have this very, very not real depiction of it. Um, that's just like an example. You can think of movies where people are attacked, or you know assaulted or raped or any of that kind of thing, and there's lots of movies where those kinds of things happen, and they're not supporting those things. It's depicting it so that we as a viewing audience know that that is a terrible thing, and that we should not wish that on anyone, that we should not do that kind of thing. um, yeah, so I think to that extent, it's up to the audience's intelligence, and to the creator of the art, to make sure it's clear that they are not supporting that kind of action. um, and
Hmm.
that's where, I don't know, But yeah, so that's I don't know. That's my thoughts on kind of extreme content. I guess is the best way I can think to phrase it.
Yeah,
Why I'm iffy about censorship.
that's interesting. Um, so, do you think some things should be censored? Like, where would you draw the line if that
That's a
is the
darn
case?
good question. Yeah, that's a darn good question.
Well, just how about in
Yeah.
general? Do you think there is content that should be censored? Like, hypothetically, there's this thing that would fall under the realm of it should be censored and people shouldn't be allowed to view it and have access to it.
I mean, child pornography is a big thing that should not
Mm.
exist and should not be viewable. I mean, it shouldn't be created in the first place, but that, can't control everyone's
I
actions. But
I don't know if I agree,
yes,
but child pornography is also illegal. Um,
yes, this is a very good point.
um,
Um,
yeah, I mean, murder is also illegal, but you can draw a picture
oh, that's a
of
good point. Depiction.
of murder. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah,
I guess to that extent, it becomes very contextual. And then, I mean, yeah. Because I definitely like read books wherein they talk about children being like children being made to have sex with someone or like in a terrible situation, and so it's always very clearly framed in a way that's like this is a bad thing. um yeah, and then but then if you have something that is more ambiguous, I don't know, that's tricky. um because discourse is important also. I'm kind of just spitballing
yeah.
thoughts as they come into my head
I'll
at this
I'll I'll
point.
tell you what kind of where I'm lying on this issue. I don't really think anything should be uh, censored. Um,
Okay.
I think if well, another thing that's interesting is this idea of censorship. It's not at all new. You know,
Mhm.
it
Of course.
it happened with I don't remember who, but it was in like ancient Greece. I remember reading there's someone that wrote this. He believed that there's certain modes that were good for society, and
Mhm.
certain modes were bad and associated with sex and drugs and heathenism, um,
Yeah.
and that if that these should be regulated, and if enough musicians were playing in these bad modes, let's call them,
Mhm.
then
Yeah.
he would witness the breakdown of society.
Interesting.
Yeah, and if they
Yeah.
played in the good modes, people would be pious and studious and all the things he would associate with good citizen.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
That's not,
that's however many thousands of years ago. And there's other
yeah.
examples of it, with rock rock music.
Yeah. Naturally. The tritone as a concept.
Yeah, the tritone is a concept. Like there's a number of examples but yeah, if you apply that today, the idea that certain modes are like if you play music in this one mode, that you're going to cause the breakdown of society and people are going to be, fornicators and not contributing in any way, and
Hmm.
it's really silly, to think about that.
Yes. That's a good point.
The same way, what happened with rock and metal music, like when that was first becoming like really popular, the older generation was like, this
Yeah.
is, noise pollution is terrible. It's going to
Yeah.
corrupt our youth. It's all these
The,
things.
yeah,
Um,
decline of Western civilization. Yeah,
yeah, which it's not,
yeah,
Um,
exactly.
so yeah, um, we're gonna say something.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I don't know. I'm on like these heavy subjects of censorship, but like music censorship, I think music should scarcely be censored. But I think
Scarce.
also
So yeah,
I
so
can't think. Yeah, like the only music that I almost like think should be censored is like National Socialist like black metal, which I haven't come across many other genres of music that have their own like I haven't come across any other genres of music that have their own specific association with like Nazism, something as heinous as the National Socialist Party. I'm sure there must be,
so you think
but
uh go on.
on the other hand, it's like not necessarily that it should just be censored so much as it should be opposed very very strongly, if that makes sense. Um, man, there's some idea I heard that was like it was an idea I heard that wasn't necessarily pro censoring things, but it was about how too much tolerance can lead to intolerance. Where like if you tolerate an intolerant group or intolerant ideas, then eventually the tolerance will be overpowered by the intolerance because the intolerance is all about suppressing tolerance. Um, but if you are tolerant, you still have to push against intolerance. Like it has to be you can't tolerate intolerance. Does that make some sense
Yeah, that
so
makes
far?
sense. And I feel like that's you're in that sense tolerance would be like apathetic acceptance of something. It wouldn't really be tolerance.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. No. Like tolerance can't be passive.
Yeah.
But I think a lot of people like a lot of the argument with people who are in favor of like intolerance or hate speech. They say like, oh, you have to tolerate us too, and it's like no. As tolerant people, we do not have to tolerate your opposing stance to us as people who want to support acceptance and love and whatever. Um, I don't know. Is
Yeah.
that a bit of a tangent? I don't know.
Um, yeah, I'm hearing I understand the argument and the case. But I don't know that I necessarily feel that that's the case. Like I don't, or let me rephrase that. I don't know if that censorship is the solution to making those ideas like go away. If
Yeah,
that's
no,
the
I agree.
yeah.
I wasn't trying to say that censorship is necessarily the solution,
Hmm.
but I think that people need to be more vocal about their opposition to the groups that support something like intolerance. So I guess overall in my head right now, as I'm talking, I'm not. I can't really think of anything that like should be completely and utterly censored. If that makes
Yeah.
sense. Even things that I think are terrible and awful, like hate speech should be pushed against as much as possible by as many people as possible, and hate crimes should remain illegal and this kind of thing. But yeah,
So you mentioned what was it, Nazism, black metal, or something to that effect.
yeah, National
So,
Socialist black metal.
yeah. So are you saying that you think that should be censored, or you weren't sure?
I'm not sure. I mean, I see
Yeah.
it pushed against heavily, like whenever there's like a band that starts to come through town, and if someone is even an alleged Nazi or Nazi sympathizer, those shows tend to get, if anyone calls the venue, those shows, like a small outcry will happen, and that show will get canceled. Like tour will end up getting entirely canceled. There's some tricky lines there where, you know, a lot of the time the evidence is kind of tenuous, and no one's really sure about if the person actually is a Nazi or not, but people see something or have heard something or heard enough that they think it's the case. I haven't done a lot of research about this myself.
Yeah.
With like the specific cases in the Bay Area. So yeah, it's tricky, but there are definitely like lots of bands that are strongly proclaimed National Socialist black metal bands, and yeah, I'm not sure that those should be censored so much as they should be just not supported. That's basically where I'm at on that.
Yeah.
Because and then there's the whole idea where if you completely censor an idea or suppress it so strongly that it's basically censored, that that it makes it garner support at like either at a later time or from the people that feel oppressed for whatever reason. And then it becomes a greater issue later.
Definitely.
Which is like, it's a hard thing to kind of balance, I think, in a societal situation.
Yeah, you know, I think like as an individual, if there's this thing, an artist or music that's promoting like hate speech or violence or something like this, as an individual, you know, don't support it. Like if you own a record shop, don't buy any of their records. Like absolutely. But yeah, I think like what you said, if it's censored kind of like globally or like by a group or some sort of entity, it kind of almost validates it in a way, because I'm kind of reminded by so you know the band Lamb of God. They used to be their name used to be Burn the Priest, and so I remember this story. I watched like an interview or something, how they're talking about how they had a concert planned at like a church or something, and like the people at the church like found out that they used to be called Burn the Priest. So then like, you know, the show got canceled, it got shut down, and it became this big thing. And like, you know, it was in the news. There's like a news article about it, you know, and ultimately it just gave them like way more publicity and more support for what they're doing. So
so that particular instance of it's like that's like a microcosm where like that particular instance of direct censorship like just created, as you said, the validation, the support for them. That's a very good point.
Yeah. So then what's the way to stop I don't know, violent and people in all these ways? I don't know. But
I don't know either. We're not here to create answers. We're just here to throw bandy ideas about, as the phrase goes. But yeah, I mean, as far as in the music world, it's like, I mean, the most direct thing we can do in the music world is only support good people, good art, and like good messages, and just not support, and make sure people know when hateful music exists and that they shouldn't support it.
Yeah, you know, and if you feel strongly about it, like tell other people why it's bad and no one should support it. Like explain the reasons why, and you know, I think that's totally cool.
Yeah, exactly.
Um, yeah. So I'm gonna change the topic a little bit. What do you think about concept albums?
Concept albums. Um, I think they can go really well, or they can be really lame. But and then in the middle there, I think there are a lot of concept albums that barely even can barely even be called concept albums, but are still really good albums. um, Man, I haven't thought about that in a while either. I used to be so into like that whole scene, the progressive rock and progressive metal scene that loves concept albums so much. It's been a while. Um,
Mm,
but I mean, like, and the tricky part with that also, I feel like, is even if you like the music, if the concept album has a really strong story and the story itself just isn't your cup of tea, like that can really mess it up. Like the biggest example for me is like um, Dream Theater's "Scenes from a Memory," Metropolis 2, which is a fantastic album. I love that album. The music's great. The concept is pretty interesting, but the story itself in the concept album, like I just personally don't like it that much. Like I still like the album a lot, and I listen to it semi regularly. But yeah, it's just something about the story seemed like it was either trying too hard or it was kind of confused or something. I don't know. What didn't catch my fancy? That's not a phrase, but whatever.
yeah. Yeah. No, I remember also on the topic of Dream Theater, I remember they put out an album like a few years ago. Um, I forget the name of it. It
Oh
was like
yeah, I
it was
think
like it was like a double album though. It was like
yeah,
they
yeah.
wanted to make
I'm
it like
looking
a
it up.
musical. Do you remember which one that was?
Yeah, I remember. I remember because when it came out, you and I would talk about it, and I think you liked it a lot more than I did. I don't know if you still like it, which
Well,
is
the thing
not a
was,
big deal either way.
yeah, the thing was I saw them perform it live. And live I thought it was
That's
cool.
right.
Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, they had this whole concept how they wanted it to be like a musical, and you know, what's the vocalist name? He's even said in like
James LaRue.
interviews that like he wants to do Broadway and wants to be in musicals and stuff. And
Yeah.
I don't know. Yeah, so seeing it live was cool just because live music is just better than listening to a record, um, in my opinion.
Yeah.
But yeah, I wasn't really into it. It's like for me personally, just listening to the record, it's like lame, like Dream Theater. It's like they thought
Yeah.
like they needed it, like it needed to be, I don't know, watered down or something. I don't know. It's
Yeah. Yeah. No, so the album's called The Astonishing, which I had
that was
forgotten.
it. Yeah.
I'm looking it up now. But yeah, I remember because I just keep up with this kind of thing. I remember listening to it pretty soon after it came out, and just being like, yeah, basically the same feeling. Where like I kind of wanted to like it, but it did feel like really uh, mediocre Dream Theater, like
Yeah.
like at their absolute worst. Like maybe Falling into Infinity is not quite as good, but I haven't listened to that in so long. But yeah. And then I remember I talked to you about it, and I think you had seen the concert, and you were like, "I think that was pretty good." I'm like, "What? What are you talking about?" But yeah, I bet
Yeah.
live I would have liked it way better.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, um, yeah, like even the weakest Dream Theater albums were better than that album, in my
Yeah.
opinion as well.
Yeah. I mean, there's like a couple cool guitar solos and
Oh, I'm
cool
sure.
cool
Yeah,
parts, but you know, as a whole, it's like, where's the good Dream Theater at?
yeah, yeah. Also, I'm thinking about it now, and I'm thinking about other Dream Theater songs where like they would have like a really long song, but it's like they would have a concept or a story kind of condensed into the one song. And
Hmm.
it's the kind of thing that sounds like it could be a concept album, but
Yeah.
because it's only a 14-minute song, whoa,
Yeah.
they uh, they make it just a little bit easier to digest and understand. Have to make it more kind of more lyrical when they convey the story. So then it becomes, it stands alone as a good song, even if you don't know the story. Then when you do know the
Hmm.
story, it's kind of like, oh, this is a cool story. Um, yeah. So yeah, I think for that specific occasion, I think Dream Theater is better at these shorter, shorter
Yeah.
concepts.
I remember I
But
saw.
I'm thinking, oh, you go ahead.
Oh no, it was stupid. What I was gonna say. I remember seeing a meme that was like longer song, longer schlong. And it was like a picture of John Petrucci on there.
Of course, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I've probably seen that at some point too. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh man, good old progressive rock.
Yeah.
I
That's
bet a
interesting
lot of
that
progressive.
yeah, that you say how they're kind of more prevalent in like progressive like genres, like these concept
Hmm.
albums and stuff.
Yeah,
Um, because I feel like concept albums for bands are kind of like the equivalent of like large symphony orchestras for in like the classical world, where it's just this large piece with like a larger form like throughout, how
yeah,
there's different movements and there's central themes that like play throughout the whole piece, or like you have like a symphony that's like 45 minutes to an hour long.
yeah,
um, it's kind of like that um, yeah, it's kind of like like the major work. It's like, oh, I'm gonna write a symphony. It'll be this. It's kind of, I feel like that's kind of equivalent to like bands wanting to create a concept album with like a central theme that
yeah,
plays throughout.
yeah. And it's definitely tricky too. I feel like in rock music, it's so. I could imagine a lot of like these kinds of musicians that they just become too kind of intentional, maybe, so that like things can become forced. They have a story and they want to like, oh, this has to be this big grand thing, and then they make like a full album, and it could be a good full album, but then maybe it like at moments will seem like it's trying too hard or a bit hackneyed or
Mm.
yes, maybe too self-aware in the creation process. Um, I'm trying to think of like concept albums I really like, and the ones that I'm thinking of they don't even have as much of like as like you're describing like the overarching musical theme or something, like music that really uh, has as much commonality between it. Think of like there's a band Camelot. You ever listen to them?
Hmm.
Um, they're like, yeah, like they had that kind of double concept album, Epica and the Black Halo. That's based around. It's like based on their own story. That's based on the story of Faust or whatever. Um,
Okay.
but
Interesting.
yeah, those albums, I think those are really really good albums. But it's so much more like each song stands alone well as like its own power metal song with like chorus, with verse chorus, solo chorus,
Hmm.
but it still follows a story. Like if you listen to the
Yeah.
album, you can hear like the characters and like what's happening in the story, but it's a little more abstract with how it's delivered, um, as opposed to a lot of Dream Theater stuff where they're like describing events as they happen and like what they're doing like in the space.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, it's
Well, with that one, they tried to make it like a musical, like that. I think that was their goal.
with the astonishing.
Yeah, the astonishing. I meant. Yeah.
Well, I'm thinking even with like scenes from a memory though, there's like
Mm.
definitely times where it becomes a lot more uh, whatever the opposite of abstract is, more concrete, like literal
Mm.
lyrics, literal scenarios with what they're describing and conveying. Um, then you get like kind of like loose concept albums. Like I mean, I've always heard people's argument that Sergeant Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band is a concept album, because it starts out with this kind of like the first song like creates a fiction of a band, the Lonely Hearts Club Band, and that that is this whole thing that exists, and they're about to perform the song with a little help from my friends,
Hmm.
and then it kind of like, but then it's kind of this notion that this made up band is playing all this music on the album, and then they reprise their theme song near the end before the last track. They have a little reprisal of the Sergeant Pepper's theme, um, as like, and it is specifically like a farewell song. Um, so it's kind of like the Beatles created this fictional group. So to that extent, it's kind of a concept album. But from song to song, it's not like it's not like there's a story between songs, like
Hmm.
describing anything. But but to that extent, maybe because it's more historic, it's called a concept album because it was like one of the first ones to kind of have that overarching idea. Um, but it's a
Yeah.
really good album, and I feel like having those bookends, almost bookends of a theme song for a made up band, kind of sets a tone for the album that's very different from like other Beatles albums or any other albums where you're kind of like you listen to it and it creates this fiction of like I am listening to all of this and it is one solid like piece. Some reason for me mentally is like the album becomes more cohesive or like it is a singular performance as opposed to another album where I'm like, okay, song, next song, next song, next song, and even though there's clear delineations between the songs, it seems more uh, ad- adhered or like coherent or something. I'm not sure how to describe it. It seems like one piece, even though it's not.
Yeah. It's like
So
different
that kind of
chapters.
concept album, yeah, yeah, exactly. So that kind of concept album, I think, probably a little easier to pull off because you can do the trick of just having something at the beginning and having something at the end, and then maybe having a track or two that flow straight into one another, and that with no gap, and it creates this illusion of continuity, um, which is a solid technique, but it's interesting.
Yeah. Um, I don't know. I don't think I've heard that about Sergeant Pepper. I'm gonna have to listen to that
Yeah,
again. That's pretty interesting.
yeah, it is. It's interesting. And I think it was also, I believe this is true. I think that was also like the first time, at least on like a rock album anyway, where two tracks um, like flowed together with no gap was like there's the first two tracks on Sergeant Pepper's because it the first track is is the title track where they're just like introducing Sergeant Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band, and then the end of it is like welcome out the one and only Billy Shears and Sergeant Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band. They play a little music, and there's like this kind of intro theme, and then they say Billy Shears, and then it goes straight into with a little help from my friends, which is being fictionally sung by Billy Shears when it's actually sung by Ringo or whatever.
Hmm.
And there's like a guitar transition straight from them announcing Billy Shears into the "What would you do if I sang you a thing?" Yeah, it's interesting,
Hmm.
and that's like and then that on top of that, that's like a big tradition in progressive rock and metal music, like since then, because that Dream Theater album, I think both those Dream Theater albums we were talking about have a lot of seamless transitions. Colors by Between the Buried and Me is famously like has no gaps between the tracks.
Mm-hmm.
I think that might also be very loosely a concept album, but I'm most familiar with the lyrics on that because they're unintelligible.
Yeah. I remember there was a couple of Dream Theater albums too that they would start or they would end the note they would end with. They would start their next album with the same note, and they
Yeah,
did that
I
for like a
remember
few
that too.
albums until like
Yeah,
um, until they did one where they started and ended, they started the note with the first song and then ended the note with the last song. So then like, oh, okay, we can finally be done with this and do something different now,
Yeah,
Um,
exactly. Yeah, I remember that too. I remember like my friend who got me into Dream Theater in high school when we were both like diving into their discography. He was just like, "This is the coolest thing. You got to like listen to these albums one after the other, and it's all the same note." Or whatever.
yeah.
Um, and there's another band that's less well known from the last 10 years that does a similar thing. Just since we're mentioning that, that I think is almost, I don't want to say cooler, but it's a little more crazy when you listen to the album itself. It's a band called Agent Fresco from Iceland. They're kind
Mm,
of like progressive rock, mathcore meets pop or whatever. They're very very good band. Um, but they only have two full lengths out, but both of them, the like each album on its own like begins. It's like the end of each album transitions seamlessly into the beginning of the same album. So if you're like listening to the album like on your own, if you're listening to the album and you finish the album and it skips back to the beginning, you might not notice that it
hmm
had started over, which
Yeah.
I think is it's a fun. First of all, it's a fun way to get people to keep listening to your album over and over again because they won't realize that they finished it. But also, it's a really cool musical device to like try and connect your ideas on a single album. Um, yeah,
Yeah.
I think that's a cool thing.
That's cool. Agent Fresco is what they're called.
Yeah, Agent Fresco. I don't know the story behind the name. It is a very strange name, but
Yeah.
they're personally my favorite. I think they're my favorite band in existence at this point.
Okay.
They're
I'll check
very
them
very
out.
good.
It sounds like they're like a soda pop salesman or something.
It is. I
Agent
know it is
Fresco.
such a weird. Hey, you want to get some of this agua fresca?
The
Yeah,
bubbly
no, it's
water.
such a it's a
Yeah.
sneaking this bubbly water into your everyday life because I'm an agent. But yeah, no, they're a phenomenal group. That's also a very progressive rock thing, just kind of having nonsense names like
Mm.
Pineapple Thief. Is that a band? And I can't think of other ones off the top of my head, but always have these like strange names.
Yeah, yeah.
Uh,
You know what else I find interesting is how like we're talking about how progressive uh, genres tend to like do more of these concept albums, but also that like just the people that go to these concerts and kind of the vibe of the concerts, like at progressive shows, they tend to like stand still more and just like listen to the music versus like thrash where they like you
yeah,
know be moshing and
thinking real hard about this music. Yeah.
yeah. Yeah.
So, what did you have a point about that, or is that just something to note?
Yeah, it's something to know. I think it's yeah, it's kind of like similar to like if like you go to like a classical music like concert, everyone's sitting
Mm-hmm.
down. It's much more
Hmm.
like suit and tie kind of deal.
Yeah, more sedate.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is. I mean, like, and that's the whole. I remember when I first got into progressive music, I was. I mean, I like it, and I like complicated music. I like listening to that kind of thing and analyzing that sort of stuff. I think that's like the whole scene kind of seems to like progressive music because they either some people it's kind of like they think they're smarter because they listen to it or they really they
Yeah.
there's a whole kind of stigma with that. But I mean a lot of it's cool music. I've met a lot of people who think that it's like soulless stuff, but I mean I think you can put a lot of heart into complicated music, and if that's just like what you're feeling, what you're thinking, what you come up with. There's lots of music I write, and I do my absolute best to write exactly what I feel when I write music, and a lot of it comes out with some weird friggin' time signatures and like weird keys, and that's my kind of soul. Like, and other people's soul is something else, and that's fine. Um, but yeah, it's interesting, especially with like progressive metal, where you expect metal to be about like
Yeah.
move around, mosh, bang your head. But then you get these songs that are like, it's hard to bang your head in 13 time, like or in
Yeah.
like 13/8, because then you gotta do one headbang that's a little bit faster than the others or something
Yeah.
to compensate or whatever else. But then on the other hand, now this is interesting. This is kind of my hot take on this, just from thinking about it right now. This is kind of why I like things like what's called the gent scene, because
Hmm.
that's like progressive metal meets metalcore, and like metalcore, it's more of the punk influence, and that's more based around music that gets you moving, gets you moshing, gets you grooving, like whatever. Um, and but then when you add the progressive element, it like encourages complicated music and weird time signatures. But I'm thinking of like I've seen like the band Periphery before, and they're kind of considered the pinnacle of progressive metalcore. And it's like, yeah, like people, like there's definitely parts of the songs where people are like, yeah, I'm sitting here, I'm thinking about this, but then they sometimes, even in the same part of the song, it's so like heavy or it's so groovy, even though it's in a weird time signature, that people are going nuts. And it's a cool thing to accomplish, I think, musically, to make things. One of my favorite things in music ever is to have something that's on paper very complicated, and can take some thought to really wrap your head around, or to emulate or replicate or whatever, but also makes you want to like just dance, or like you know throw yourself around a room like a crazy person, like whatever else. um
Yeah,
of course, like
definitely.
Meshuggah is like Meshuggah is a prime example of that, but they're like kind of, or it's just like they're so heavy you can't not move if you're at their concert, but also their music is way more complicated than almost any other metal band out there, even though it might like sound simple, but if you were to try and play it, you would have way more trouble playing that than you would a Dream Theater song, probably, for most musicians anyway.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think there's like no reason why you can't dance to like 13/8 or whatever time signature, like
Yeah,
I mean, other
definitely.
than cultural reasons, and you be like used to maybe like 4/4 or something. But I
Yeah,
think
true.
that's other cultures have popular music. I think it's really only Western culture that all our popular music are is like within 4/4, like 3/4, and these common time signatures. Like other cultures have like music in other uh, rhythms and meters and tunings too.
Yeah.
Not just 12-tone equal temperament.
Yeah, no, you're totally right. Yeah, now that you're saying that, I'm thinking of like, I can't remember, somewhere in Eastern Europe that even um, like they had like a common dance that was just in seven, um, but
Hmm.
it had a particular pattern, particular moves that matched the seven time. And I've definitely come across like folk music from Finland and those places that are like in nine, or just in whatever other uh, other time signatures that in Western music would be denoted very differently from any kind of common time. Um,
Yeah, definitely. And there was another thing I was going to say about that, about what was it? Different time signatures. Oh yeah, complex music versus like, I don't know. Yeah, this is a concept um, that I was reading a book. It was called Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance, and
oh
it
yeah,
kind of
I've heard of
had,
that. I haven't read it myself.
yeah. Well, basically, it had the concept of like kind of I forget if you use it. I think it was he called the romantic and like the classical type brain,
Hmm.
or like emotion or whatever.
Hmm.
And you could categorize art or music in that way as like romantic being like the emotion, what you feel, like the kind of visceral, um, like thrash music or club music, like every
Yeah.
beat's the downbeat, doom doom
Yeah.
doom. Whereas like classical could be more um, stimulating to like your intellectual side, like the
Hmm.
numbers and like the way things are constructed and like um, form and having
Yeah.
things born like yeah, and kind of like there's different examples of that within the book, like how like saying there's this guy that was like really into just looking at um, reading manuals and like spreadsheets, and he's like, oh, they mentioned this thing and this is really cool. It was like really technical stuff. And then there's this other guy that was like kind of could be labeled as romantics. Like he didn't care about none of that. He just wanted to ride his bike. Like if it broke
Hmm.
down, he would
Yeah.
take it to a mechanic. He didn't want to like deal with like putting the stuff together, or like
Yeah.
um, fussing over like tiny little details. This tiny little bolt has to fit here and it has to be this certain way.
Hmm.
He just wants to
Yeah.
like have that feeling of riding a bike.
Yeah.
Um, and I feel like progressive music kind of tends to be more on like the intellectual side, or um, I don't know if like classical isn't a very good term for it, but
Yeah.
and then there's music like thrash music, let's say, will
Yeah.
have that more visceral feeling of like satisfying, like driving drums and like constant pulse
Yeah.
and I think you can definitely have progressive music or technical music that also has feeling.
Yeah.
Um, because I feel that way too. I really like a lot of technical music, um,
Yeah.
but I feel like for me at least, technical music that works really well also has some elements of like the visceral side of music, you know.
Yeah.
Um,
Absolutely.
like there's some uh, music that is just almost purely like intellectual side without any of like the
Hmm.
visceral stuff that we enjoy about music. Like um, I think Alvin Lucier's like "I Am Sitting in a Room" is like that,
Yeah.
you know, because it's just like purely a concept. It's nothing that we traditionally or culturally enjoy about a pulse and a beat and like things that we describe as like being music.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's interesting. Like with my brain being so or my listening being so metal oriented, I'm like drawing a
Hmm.
comparison um specifically in like the death metal subgenre because I feel like even that within that subgenre there's a really strong um there's two strong little sub kind of scenes um where one of them is very much about the intellectual and one of the other one's very much about the visceral um where like because I mean you and I have played death metal before and so there's the whole technical death metal scene which is all about playing as fast as you can, crazy arpeggios and wild arrangements, probably weird time signatures too, and some of that like can be cool, but some of it can also get pretty unlistenable because it's just shredding and nothing's happening. But then there's the what's called the slam death metal scene, like the brutal slam scene, and a lot of that
Hmm.
gets just and that's like way more. It's all about like the heavy, like just pounding
Yeah.
riffs and like and all this kind of stuff with like maybe a little thing thrown in once in a while that's like a different speed. But then they'll change tempos, but usually it's kind of just different different pounding tempos. Like so it's really slow, then it's a little bit faster, then it's the same thing but it's a little slower, and that can be cool too. But a lot of the time it gets really mundane, and
Yeah. It's caveman music.
But yeah, exactly. And then that's it's pretty fun sometimes. But then a lot. But just it's very much sometimes. But then it's interesting because if you look at like older death metal, like the stuff that all that stuff was inspired by, I find, and what I personally think is like a lot of the best death metal, it has all of it, and it's like the songs will be complicated. They'll have lots of tempo changes, some really crazy shreddy parts, but then they'll have some sections that flow nicely where it's just like pound away, really slow riffs, and like the drums are taking it easy, but they're really hitting you hard, and the guitars are doing something that's really easy to connect to, and then it goes into something faster and wilder. And I think like musically it's can be more complicated than either of those things sometimes, because you have to shift a lot and change what you're doing, and be more conscious of your arrangements and that kind of thing. So yeah, it's interesting to see in that scene how like a certain group of people like really connected with one little aspect of that subgenre and then made another subgenre out of it, and then on the other end other people connected with the other part of that song and then made a subgenre out of that.
Yeah, I think like the culture and like the imagery that goes along with slam like metal is like really kind of strange too. Like the really, I don't know, have you seen like some of these like really pornographic like imagery, like cover art, and it's just like
yeah,
it's
well, I mean, like
it's ridiculous, you know.
it gets out of hand. I mean, like it's even like the old death metal had like some of that, you know, like I don't know, Cannibal Corpse is the prime example. Like Tomb of the Mutilated, the cover is all like zombies performing unspeakable sexual acts on each other or whatever. And then like all the song titles on that album, like the most tame song title on that album is Beyond the Cemetery, and the second most tame is Hammer Smashed Face. And then it's all downhill from there. With like sexual content and violent content. But the music on that album is extremely well done. Like the musicianship is through the roof. The arrangements are like really, really complicated, and it sounds like to on the first listen or to an amateur's ear, it could sound like, oh, these guys are changing tempo all over the place. This doesn't make any sense. But then when you I remember that's how I felt the first time I heard like Hammer Smashed Face. But then when I listened to it again, I realized, oh wait, but they're always going to the same tempo on very specific points. Like they'll have this tempo, then it goes to this tempo, which is slightly different, and then it goes right back up to this tempo just enough for that, like when they repeat a riff or whatever theme. And then like the more you listen to it, the more you realize it's really precise. Then you like watch them play it live, and it's just as the tempo changes are all exactly the same. So it's like it's not some terrible mistake. It's not just a fluke. It's like they know what they're doing.
Yeah.
But back on but slam metal, the imagery gets terribly out of hand, and like some people like enjoy that kind of thing. But I think there's also like some groups get out of hand with like the kind of misogynistic imagery and lyricism that's kind of just like it's lame to begin with, and now it's on top of it it's tired and hackneyed. It's overdone. It's meaningless. I wish it was meaningless. Really, I think for some people it might mean something. That sucks.
Talking about Cannibal Corpse, I think I like a lot of their stuff. I think it's like really cool. But I'm not really into like the lyric content that much. Like sometimes there's I don't know, I'm thinking of like one song, but like the song's like really cool, but then like if you actually like read the lyrics, I was like, I'm not feeling this as like, I wouldn't read this as poetry, you know. It's like
Yeah,
This is
yeah. Something inside me, it's coming out.
yeah,
I feel like killing you. Um,
yeah.
yeah, it's the only song I know the lyrics to. But no, I remember when I first started getting into metal and especially extreme metal, and my mom was a very good sport and didn't really chastise me so much as like voiced concern at times. Like when I heard when I first started listening to Metallica, she was kind of like, "Oh, okay," and then I started pointing out that they had complicated music, that it was really interesting, and she could hear that, and she was like, "Oh yeah, you know what? You're right. I never noticed that about Metallica." And I started listening to like Cannibal Corpse, and then she would hear the vocals,
Straight to Cannibal
and
Corpse.
yeah, no,
Yeah,
there's a couple of years between there, but
yeah, yeah.
but the thing she would always say that cracked me up was she'd be like, "Oh well, I can't understand what they're saying," and I like that's kind of lame. And then before I could ever say anything, she'd always be like, "Oh, but I probably don't want to know what they're saying." I'm like, exactly. Like I don't want to know what they're saying either, but the music's really good. um,
Yeah.
so yeah, that was always kind of my. And like some death metal has great. There's some death metal lyricists that are great. When I actually go and sit down to read it, I'm like,
Yeah.
oh, this is poetry, and
Yeah.
it's very good. But some of it's also just weird, like horror imagery being described, or just kind of not child, maybe kind of juvenile, violent lyrics,
Yeah.
and yeah, at that point for death metal for me is so much more about the music, it's the instrumentation than it is about lyrics for sure, and the
Yeah.
energy. I mean, I enjoy that the energy, but you know, yeah, I usually avoid reading death metal lyrics.
Yeah. Which I mean it can be valid too, I think. But
Yeah.
so let me bring this back to what we were talking about earlier. So what if there was like hypothetically speaking this amazing death metal group that was like your favorite music, but they had like some lyrics that were nationalistic and like hate speech and like this really terrible, awful stuff like blacks aren't people and you should kill like you know.
Yeah, I would stop listening to that. I think that actually kind of happened to me in high school, because when I first came
Mm,
across the band Burzum, and I like wasn't fully familiar with the history of black metal. Like I knew he had burned down some churches and like been a bad boy. I know he killed Euronymous and that kind of thing, but so I was kind of like, oh, okay, that's like a weird bit of history. And I heard his music and I was like, this is good music. And then probably some months, maybe even like a year after that, is when I first finally got wind of the fact that he's a National Socialist. He's a Nazi, and then I kind of like thought about that for a little bit, being a teenager, just to figure out my moral stance. And then I was like, you know what? I don't need to listen to Burzum,
hmm,
like of my own volition. Forget it. And I don't even think his lyrics were. I don't. I mean, I never really read them much, but I think from what I remember, his lyrics themselves aren't explicitly, uh, hateful or like full of hate speech or supporting Nazism. But just the fact that he himself is so vehemently a National Socialist is kind of like I feel kind of gross listening to this guy's music,
hmm,
especially being a one man band where it's very much, oh, this is like one guy who is this way and this is his vision. Like I don't really want to be involved with that vision.
yeah.
Forget it.
Would you encourage others not to listen to that particular artist because of those reasons?
I probably would encourage them not to, or I heard someone was listening to them and they didn't seem
Hmm,
aware of that. I would want to make them aware of it. Um, I can never force anyone to do anything really.
yeah.
And it's thought about this before, and I've never felt like I've never really made a decision. Like if someone was listening to music that outwardly supported Nazism or like race hate or anything like that, then I think I would like just I would have to cut ties with them as, to as great an extent as I could, because I don't like to associate with racists or xenophobes or anything like that. Um, but yeah, I've also met people that were able to listen to some music and totally separate it from the individual, or like from a musician's ideology, when that
Hmm.
music was completely separated from that musician's ideology. And it's a tricky thing. Like I feel like I see both sides a lot of the time with that. And I generally try to avoid music by intolerant musicians or artists. But I've met people that were clearly, you know, don't support the person that made the music, but they'll listen to the music because they like grew up with it before that
Hmm.
person was known as whatever they are or were or whatever. Um, and that at that point, that's kind of like, no, that's your choice, and I know you're not a hateful person, so I'm gonna hold them to their goodness.
Yeah, I think with the exception of like, lyrics, if like music has like lyrics that are explicitly saying racist things,
Mm-hmm.
I think you could separate the art, or you should separate the art from the artist. Um,
Mm-hmm.
because, well, an example would be, I remember there's like this, another stupid meme that I saw. Um, uh, but it was like, it was a painting, right? And then like you'd see the painting, and then you'd look down. It's like it'd be like, look at this painting, and
Mm-hmm.
then below it'd say like, this painting was painted by Hitler, like you uh, enjoyed, Nazism or whatever. Um,
Yeah, yeah. I remember like when I first stopped when I stopped listening to Burzum because of his ideology. I had a couple of friends who were not metalheads at all, and I just told them, I was like, "Oh, I listen to this band. Found out this guy's a Nazi. I'm going to stop listening to him." And they were very much like, "What? That doesn't make any sense." And then I gave that hypothetical example. I was like, "Well, I mean, if Hitler made a pop song that you liked a lot, like, would you listen to that pop song if it
mm,
wasn't supporting his ideology, but was made by Hitler?" And they said they were just like, "Oh yeah," and they were like, they weren't like white people at all. They were like, I think both Latino people, saying like, yeah, I would totally listen to it as long as it wasn't supporting his Nazi ideology. And so that was kind of where I gained that conundrum where I was like, huh, okay, you can separate the art from the artist.
yeah, I
Um,
mean, even
but
taking
yeah,
that further, like if Hitler said 2 + 2 = 4, does that mean like, is that wrong
yeah,
or bad or
yeah, that's a
invalid?
good point.
It's just
Yeah,
more an
or
observation.
more applicably, like, yeah, more applicably, like the fact that Hitler was a vegetarian, like
Yeah, yeah,
you can't
exactly.
condemn vegetarianism.
Yeah,
Um, yeah, that said, Hitler was a terrible person, and you generally shouldn't emulate his public image.
yes.
Um,
You're wrong. No,
uh, no, I'm
I,
just
would-
kidding.
I, would-
No,
I, would- I would
don't
agree.
bring up the sound bites. um,
Um,
yeah, it's tricky, and I mean, and like I've heard people talk about how they won't listen to music by like Karl Orff or Richard Wagner because they were
mhm.
like possibly associated with National Socialism even before the Nazi Party was a thing. I think, at
Yeah,
least for Wagner. I think Orff might have been around at the same time. But but I mean, like,
Wagner
on the other hand,
definitely.
yeah.
Yeah, Wagner definitely had some like anti-Semitism, like writings
Oh,
and
that's right.
ideologies and
Yeah,
stuff.
yeah,
I'm not sure about the other
yeah,
person.
yeah. The guy who composed them, Carmina Burana.
Mm,
It's a great piece of music, and I like Carmina Burana a lot. But I mean, I'm not gonna go saying Karl Orff was a good guy by any means, and
yeah,
I'm not gonna give him money if I can help it. Um,
yeah.
on the other hand, like one of my personal things is that like I could never of my own volition like buy a car made by Ford because Henry Ford was also like an anti-Semite, and just the fact that all his cars have his name on it I'm just like, I don't really want to. I don't want to like kind of put myself next to
Mm.
that, if that makes sense. I don't know, that's like a thing for me.
Hmm. Okay. Yeah. I mean, that's fine.
Yeah, no, I don't know.
Um,
Yeah, no, it's just,
that, I mean, once you start going down that path, though, there's so many things within our culture that have like questionable, like, origins, like,
yeah.
um, our, you know, cell phones, for example, or
Hmm.
laptops, or like these things that we use every day,
Oh yeah,
um,
like
our clothes,
built-in,
even.
yeah,
Yeah,
built-in
like,
structures of oppression. Yeah,
yeah, it's, if you start, I mean, yeah, it's like these things are like
I mean,
made
yeah,
in like sweatshops and like factories where like just terrible conditions, it's like,
yeah. It's seems virtually inescapable
yeah,
to, if you're going to just exist in society and not be extremely wealthy and buying artisanally made smartphones
yeah,
from your local grocer, or something. Whatever. Um, yeah, it's hard. And it's a lot. There's a lot of hard lines to straddle, to navigate, and with with art and with your everyday existence, and to live ethically is a challenge.
yeah. With another thing I find interesting going with like the idea of like separating the art from the artist and like
Mm-hmm.
authorship is like, people like back in uh, the Middle Ages, like medieval like Europe, like monks and stuff,
Mm-hmm.
or like
Yeah.
composers when they would write music or like copy stuff, they wouldn't sign their name on it. The idea was
Mm.
like that these things are created for the glory of God and like for the community, and like, we as a society are like one organism, and it's like I'm not gonna write my name on it because it just belongs to, um, humanity, I guess.
Yeah, yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, I think I've heard of similar concepts. Now that you mention it, like I'm thinking about like there's lots of yeah, I mean there's lots of like art projects and music like I mean the most famous example of course is like Banksy. He's an anonymous being and he creates art and you might connect with that art and it has its message, but then if you like if his identity got revealed and he was someone who if he was like a known Nazi or something, but none of his art had ever condoned Nazism or any of that kind of thing. Like, can you? Yeah, like then so, do you suddenly dislike all that art, or you just dislike that artist as a person? You know?
Hmm.
Yeah, and it's tricky. I feel like I've come across art like that, and a lot of the time my decision with that is like to just make sure I'm not giving make sure I'm not giving any kind of support to that artist,
Yeah.
even if I like will hear that art or see that art and be like, oh, okay, that's like that's good art that is like on its own in a vacuum, basically.
Yeah.
But that artist is a piece of crap.
Yeah.
But it's hard because I mean, it's also it's hard because a lot of art also. I mean, all art also kind of exists in a context, and there's
Hmm.
lots of arguments about about context and how all art should be taken in its context and treated that way. And I can say, and a lot of those arguments I can agree with, and I haven't dove. I'm gonna say dove again. I think that's the right word. I haven't dived into it um, a whole lot. So yeah, I'm not the authority.
Yeah. No, I don't think anyone is an authority
Yeah,
to say, to
agreed.
dictate that sort of thing, or anything.
Yeah,
I don't know.
yeah,
Um,
yeah.
but yeah, that's it's interesting too if you think about like in the terms of like architecture. It's like the pyramids were like built by slaves, or there's like examples of like castles or whatever that were built by slaves. It's like, like, well, we don't agree with slavery. Like, no, you're not going to tear it down. It's like it's already done. Like, just leave it up there. You know,
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
already just existing. It's a piece of history now.
yeah, yeah, completely.